Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
It is my uh, unimaginable honor to say a few words by introducing you. I would directly go to the young scholars who have organized this program, the young students who have organized this program, and tell them that the creation of civilization is naturally a very fundamental matter, and this is being approached by two methods. One of the approach is the theological approach, in which we take the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah and some fiqh rules and try to use them for revive what you call as reviving the Islamic civilization. And then the other approach is the modernist approach, where we use the modern sciences like philosophy of history and sociology, etc. But there is a third approach, which uses Islamic philosophy to supplement the theology in order to answer this question of how to revive the Islamic civilization. And it is this third approach, which is, unfortunately, it is still not mainstream, but it has gained tremendous strength. For instance, we have Ibrahim Kalin in Turkey, who is trying to give a particular direction to research in the universities in the light of Islamic philosophy. In Malaysia, we have Usman Bakar, who is trying to devise the curricula for high schools and even graduation courses in the light of Islamic philosophy. Then we have Dr. Suhail Umar in Pakistan, who is trying to, who has in the last 10 years given a particular shape to the work of the prestigious Iqbal Academy in the light of Islamic philosophy. And then we in India, in the last 5 years, we are trying to apply Islamic philosophy in order to find principles for very diverse subjects such as Unani medicine, Ayurveda, bioethics, law, literary criticism, etc. And all these few examples which were offered to give to my young listeners the idea of the third approach to answering fundamental questions like how to create civilization, the third approach which uses Islamic philosophy to supplement theology. All these examples which have been offered, they are all the students of Professor S.H. Nasr. Myself, I did not have the honor to be of a direct teaching from him, but I think I would be second to none in reading all his books and lapping up all his words on the YouTube lectures and thinking over them. So this brings to us this can help us to understand what is the role of Professor Nasr in present day learning and present day civilization planning, etc. He is the central figure who has brought in this third approach of supplementing Islamic theology with Islamic philosophy. And this brings us to the question of Islamic philosophy. Islamic philosophy is Islamic Islamic philosophy is and Islamic sciences. They are we do not even begin to suspect that they are as systematic, as technical, as sophisticated, and as as systematically and coherently developed as the present day modern social sciences or modern natural sciences. In fact, they are much wider than that, and they are much deeper than that, and they are living. They are living sciences. They are living disciplines, which have been restated in the contemporary idiom, and which have been engaged with Western philosophy as well as with the contemporary issues. And then they have been used to bring very new and novel and very fruitful solutions to the contemporary issues. So this is the tremendous meaning of Islamic philosophy, the traditional Islamic philosophy, which, as Professor Nasr has just pointed out, which has been developed and practiced in the last 1400 years. It is living. It is very sophisticated, and it is very powerful, and it has got the whole ability to address present day issues and to give them a very positive direction, and to extricate the thought and civilization from the morass and crisis in which it has indulged. It has got that ability. And we have started seeing that function of Islamic philosophy in some of the few examples which I just offered in Turkey, in Malaysia, in Pakistan, in India, and in Sudan, the late Badawi, who tried to develop an Islamic psychology over there and brought it down to very practical level in clinical psychology. So it has already shown its ability to deliver at a very practical level. So my purpose over here was just to just to make it clear to young minds over here uh, uh, what Professor Nasr stands for, what his work stands for, because unfortunately that approach to issues, to learning, is poorly known in these areas, particularly among the students. They have either the theological approach or the modern Western approach, modern social sciences approach to these issues. So my purpose was to show that that in Islamic civilization, the learning which developed on the basis of Quran and Sunnah, and on the basis of intellectual principles obtained from other civilizations, that learning is very sophisticated. It is very powerful, and it has the ability to give a lead. It has already demonstrated its ability to lead humanity to develop a civilization which has a great medicine, which has great buildings like Taj Mahal, which has got great economic progress, and human peace and decency, and which has again, it has been revived, it has been restated, it has been re-engaged with the Western philosophy and contemporary issues, and it has again demonstrated its ability to give guidance to human beings in the 21st century. It has started demonstrating its ability many at a very practical level. A few examples which I have offered, they can be approached in order to find out the practical fruits which Islamic philosophy has started bearing. So from Professor, I will request Professor Nasr to please continue and enlighten us in the light of this introduction which I have just made of Islamic philosophy as a third approach, where it is there in the service of Islamic theology, and at the same time it is cognate with modern Western learning, social sciences and natural sciences. It is cognate with it, but much superior to it, and fully capable of providing lead to Muslims and to humanity at large. So this is, if Professor Nasr could take on from here and say some fundamental words, some some fundamental ideas he may present, so that our young listeners may have may have a strong basics of this Islamic, traditional Islamic philosophy and traditional Islamic learning as a vehicle and means of solving our problems and achieving the possibilities of the 21st century, both in the Muslim world as well as in humanity at large. So is the traditional Islamic philosophy and learning, which has already been developed in our history, that has this ability. So if that could become more clear to our young listeners, so that's what I would request Professor Nasr, please do. And I'm just controlling myself for expressing my feelings towards him, because that would just deluge and my utterances. I would be able to say nothing. So I'm very strongly controlling myself and trying to be uh, as uh, as uh, as rational as possible, and just to focus on the topic which is ahead. And I would just make the sacrifice of keeping my feelings to myself. Thank you very much, Professor Nasr.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words. I'm very glad to meet you, at least from far away, at least as to see your picture and to hear your words. And I pray that what you talked about will become realized more and more every day among the Muslims of India, as among other Muslims, stretching from Malaysia to Bosnia and all the lands in between, and also the Muslims residing in the West. I could continue for a few minutes to talk about this myself, or I could ask if the other people have a particular question that they want me to address. They don't seem to say anything, so the names that are appearing here. But so what I think I shall do, and this is a specific question, is to try to lay a plan before you of sort of at the particular point in which we are, what should we be doing, you might say. As you pointed out, and as all of you who've studied in India especially know, a land which was a colony of Britain for a long, long time. And today, not only India, which was direct colony, but even places which were not direct colonies, whether it be Turkey, Iran, or parts of the Arab world, uh, nevertheless, they were intellectually colonized in ways that continue to this very day. We might not have a British viceroy in India, but we have a cultural, philosophical viceroy that invisibly influences so many different things. But alhamdulillah, that's kind of been an excuse for us. We also have the freedom to think correctly, to live in the right way, to be in the right state of being and mind. That freedom God has not taken away from us, and that is why we are responsible. We cannot blame others for what we can do. We could blame others if there's something that we cannot do. If someone ties my hand behind my back and throws me into the water, I cannot swim. All right, that's his fault. But if he throws me in the water and I still can swim, it's my responsibility to swim and and save myself and not drown. So first of all, let's start with this point that we Muslims have no excuse really for not being awake, intellectually alert, active vis-a-vis the forces that confront us from the outside world, and also within certain circles within our society, which have become totally influenced by Western ideas. We have no excuse. Uh, 56 years ago, this matter was much more difficult, but now the task is even easier. The three people you mentioned in your talk, they're all my former students and friends, very, very close associated with me. And there are three different Islamic countries, and they weren't there 50 years ago. They're there now. If you looked at Pakistan 50 years ago, yes, the circle of classical traditional ulama was still there, but the universities and so forth were much more westernized than now even. So we have this freedom, and we have no excuse before Allah Ta'ala of not making use of this freedom in order to be ourselves. You might say, if I can use this in a theological way, there's no condition that God puts us in which we cannot say La ilaha illallah, even inwardly, even if you are before police who are going to shoot us. Inwardly, we can say La ilaha illallah. That freedom is never taken away. God has given us that freedom as long as we're human beings. And on the civilizational cultural level, we have this freedom. So on the basis of this, what is it that we should do? I think the examples now set by these men whom you mentioned, there are others also, is a very good one for the younger generation of people I met at the beginning of this program, young men, 20, 30 years old, or women. It doesn't make any difference. The Alhamdulillah kind of path has already been opened up. There are three basic things that we have to do, I believe. First and foremost, to know ourselves. When the Prophet ﷺ said, Man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbahu, he who knows his nafs, himself, knows God, knows his Lord. That nafsahu does not mean only our hawajas, our emotions, our carnal inclination. No, it also means to know oneself. We have to know ourselves. And that means we have to know our religion, our intellectual heritage, our spiritual heritage, our ethical heritage, our artistic heritage, all that has made us be what we are right now. You and I are talking together right now, and those young men I cannot see on the screen, and millions of other people. We have to be true to ourselves. And this is the first condition. And that means we have to sometimes rediscover who we are, to reroot ourselves in our own traditions, in the civilization, the religion, the spirituality that created us, that made us what we were, what we are. Yes, we have biological father and mother, they have biological father and mother, they have biological father and mother, but also we have spiritual, intellectual, religious father and mother, grandfather, grandmother, and so on. So in a sense, going back, it might not be biologically related, but the ulama, the Sufis, the scholars, the physicians, the mathematicians, the social scientists, the fuqaha, all the different branches of Islamic learning who over the centuries have studied, added to, transmitted the body of Islamic knowledge, which is the heart of our civilization and the heart of our religion, because Islam is based on La ilaha illallah, and La ilaha illallah is a formula of the knowledge of God, not sentiments about God. Yes, those are very important. We must love God, of course. But La ilaha illallah is a formula of knowledge. Who is God? The God is the one. The oneness of God is an aspect of knowledge. And we have this whole tradition before us that's transmitted to us. So our first task must be to rediscover that tradition, to live it, to learn it as much as possible. It's a colossal task when we think how lazy we have been in the last couple of centuries in comparison to the West, which we emulate in the wrong ways. But the same West that has brought us so many false ideas, so many false customs, so many evil habits, also is thinkers. All of their writings have been edited, published, made available. I always give this example. If you're a German, there are several total complete editions of the works of Immanuel Kant, one of the most famous German philosophers. But if you're a Persian like me, there's not one edition of Ibn Sina's complete works. Ibn Sina is as much yours as mine, or everybody's a very major Islamic philosopher, the most famous, not to talk of all the others. We don't even have the complete works of our major thinkers available. We have a lot of works on fiqh, but what the Islamic world needs right now more than anything else is to provide the intellectual response to the West. The great challenge of the West is primarily intellectual. Everything else follows suit. The reason my daughter wants to wear a Western dress is ultimately because the West is more powerful than we are, or she thinks it is, and is most powerful because of economic, military factor, things like that. It's not more powerful than poetry. She doesn't even know any poetry, my daughter. I mean, now she knows some Western poetry, but I'm just giving this as an example. Your daughter, somebody else's daughter. So the first thing is the revival of the Islamic tradition, and especially its intellectual and spiritual aspect. And unfortunately, this process not only encounters the opposition of modernists, when a country like Pakistan and India, until a few years ago, even Islamic philosophy was taught on the basis of Western books on Islamic philosophy, where Dibor was still taught at Aligarh when I first visited it, as a history of Islamic philosophy. 200 million Muslims in the subcontinent couldn't write one book of philosophy of their own. And I'm not criticizing India, the same, the Arab world, everywhere else. It's not only India and Pakistan. It's the whole of the Islamic world. So we have to, in a sense, revive our tradition. Secondly, secondly, we have no choice. We have no choice but to know the Western world well. A lot of people, they know the Western world in the sense of knowing what is the most fancy shop in London to buy dress. Yeah, and they know pop music as soon as it comes out in America. You have Urdu pop and Persian pop music. The bad things we learn from very, very quickly. But we don't know the West in depth. We have not produced 1/100th of the number of scholars that the West has produced about the Islamic world. People who know Arabic and Persian and then put some Urdu and Turkish and very well, they know the history very well and so forth. We have very few people, very, very few people. During this last century, most of our thinkers have always been 10th rate Western thinkers. And those who have been great thinkers like Allama Tabatabai, Maulana Ali Nadwi in India and so forth, they're not even known in the West. And or even other parts of the Islamic world sometimes. They're known only locally in the particular country in which they lived, in contrast to the old days when Farabi, Ibn Sina, and Sohrawardi were known throughout the Islamic world. The communication was much greater than there is today. So this is the first. The second thing, as I said, for the second thing was to know the West as Muslim thinkers, not as second-rate Western thinkers or scholars with Muslim names. It's not enough to name the Hassan or Abdullah and write something about Western thought, but from a Western point of view. We have to do it from our point of view. Why is it that a German scholar can write about Ibn Sina from the point of view of Western thought, and we cannot write about Hegel from the point of Islamic thought? What's wrong with us? We can do that. So this is the second task, to reappraise everything Western from the more subtle intellectual and cultural aspects to those things which are obvious. Our ulama made a great mistake in that. They did not realize how dangerous the challenge of the West was. They concentrated their criticisms on ladies' skirts and not drinking French wine and this. That was fine. But that was only a small part of life. They did not pay attention to what enters the mind and affects our actions in 1,001 ways. Allama Tabatabai, my great teacher in Iran, was one of the very few traditional alims who realized that Islam is in need of providing a response to Western way of thinking. And to do that, you have to know the Western thinking of knowing. But to know correctly, you need a knower. You need a knower and a known and the action of knowing. You need three things. Al-alim wal ma'lum in Arabic. But if the alim, the knower, is absorbed completely in the known, I don't mean in the mystical way, in the usual way, that's not going to produce correct knowledge. The French or German scholars or English scholars who studied the history of India, some of them loved India. So John Woodruff loved even Tantrism. And not all of them were against, but they spoke as Westerners. They had a worldview. There was the identifiable knower who then came to know a subject, let's say Punjabi poetry or something like that. But as an independent thinker, so it's the second thing. The third, which is the most difficult, is having accomplished those two tasks, then to be able to apply that knowledge to the creation of our own cultural norms, intellectual norms that are needed for us today. This, according to my over 50 years of experience in this matter, is how I see the program that should go on for us. And that's why I accept to speak to the young people at Aligarh. I receive 100 requests every month to speak here and there. I'm an old person, I cannot accept them all. But Aligarh was always dear to my heart. I've visited it several times. I've known many of its graduates, many of its teachers. And so I will end. I have to end. I get tired quickly. We pray that this program will be a small step, but an important step in bringing about greater awareness of the importance of the genuine character of our own tradition, of how precious it is to guard that and to apply it again. We do not need to create a new Islamic civilization. We can't, but we can revive Islamic civilization. And inshallah, with the effort of everyone of good intention, but most of all, bi'awn Allah, by the grace and aid of God, that shall be possible, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much. I So now I request the organizers to please take over.
First of all, I thank Janab Seyyed Hossein Nasr Sahab today for blessing our session today, and we are extremely thankful to him for accepting our invitation, giving us his precious time and blessing our event, and obviously enlightening us on the very important topic of Islamic civilization. And also, I want to thank Professor Yusuf Amin Saab for his valuable presence and the well-curated introduction of Professor Nasr Saab, for which we all are underqualified. I also want to thank both of you on behalf of the team of Students Islamic Organization, Aligarh Muslim University, who did everything in their power to make this event a success and to bring their wish of having a discourse of religious and spirituality in academic campuses, which is very necessary. And meanwhile, I find it necessary to introduce SIU a bit. So Student Islamic Organization is an ideological organization working in India since its inception on 19th October 1982. For the social progress and development of students' fraternity, SIU endeavors to prepare students and youth for the reconstruction of society in the light of divine guidance. And this event is one of the steps toward that mission. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our all the efforts and to make it successful. Jazakallah khair for everyone for joining us today, and it was indeed a blessing for us to have Janab Seyyed Nasr Saab and Professor Yusuf Amin Saab. So Jazakallah khair for everyone for joining this session. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.